Hi everyone at Community Folks. Am I audible? This is Navin Narayanan. Good evening to you all on a lovely Saturday night when most of us are trapped at home. You're stuck here spending your evenings with me. Okay, Himanshu is saying let's get started. Okay, let's do that. And I wanted to give more time for questions. So I'll just give you a brief construct of, I figured, what we could talk about today. And this is my very first direct Facebook live session, though we've had Zoom webinars that were streamed on Facebook live, but we really took the Q&A within the Zoom construct. I'm assuming it works pretty much the same way. You ask questions and hopefully I read them and answer them. And if I miss something, I'm going to rely on our good friend Himanshu's help in pointing them out. But the topic really, I think there were some posts inside the community itself that Himanshu kind of triggered. And I'm sensing all of us have been in this space for a while, that when we try to create our own communities where we are passionate about something that is interesting to us and where we have carte blanche to do what we want to do, because I guess when we started, we are the masters of wherever we want the community to go towards. And it is a cause for us. We have very less, I guess, relatively less difficulty in setting that up. But when you are going to do this on behalf of a brand, and you want it to be your career, etc., you always run into challenges, big and small, with a whole host of brands. There may be a few that have embraced the idea of community management as important to the business, but there are really few. I mean, if you look at the vast spectrum of brands and businesses that are out there, communities as part of ways of doing business is still very, very small. I mean, you can count, I mean, everybody gives you the examples of Harley Davidson and Starbucks, and I'm sure if you're in the blockchain ecosystem, everybody has started forming communities. Or if you are a brand like Xiaomi or OnePlus or any one of those that have communities, then the community construct is set. There are teams who understand the value of community and senior leadership that probably understands it to a certain degree. But the vast set of companies out there, they don't really get what the idea of a community is. That's been our experience. And for the last 5 years or so, we have been meeting with clients primarily because I work in a consulting firm, so we have access to clients. So we have gone and talked to them about the idea of starting communities, and in this narrative, because no conversation with a client is a one-time conversation. It's an ongoing conversation about the value of communities. You get a lot of questions that are thrown at you and doubts that are thrown at you that you find it interesting and challenging to answer. So, what is the framework in which we are now starting to talk to clients? That's what I wanted to share. I don't think it is, I guess, panacea for all communities, but I think it should. What would I say? It should give strong guidance on what narrative probably to choose and what ones to avoid. So I'm going to try and answer questions from that framework. If you have questions related to how exactly to form communities or how should you build a community, etc., those ones I suggest we park it, because there will be much better experts than just me to tell you specifically how to start your communities, and you'll find them within Community Folks itself. Right? Great. So with that said, that's the context. Let's see if we can try and answer your questions. Okay, I'm going to kind of scroll through this. And I would assume Neha's asking, how do you get volunteers? I struggle with that. Neha, if I have not understood your question right, I don't think this is a conversation with a client. So I'm going, or a brand leader, so I'm going to park that as potentially a question that's different. If you want to clarify that, then I'll address it as I come back around. But I think that may be one of the kinds of questions that you may have better experts in this community can answer that, right? Okay, questions. Yes, guys. While you're thinking of your questions, I'm going to look at some posts that came up. And I think this was by Varu Dwarak. I hope I'm not butchering anybody's name. And I'm reading this out. A lot of brands run in silos. They have acquisition, retention, and engagement teams separately thinking that they are doing great. And they all had community as well, but they didn't know how to bring all of them there and utilize the most. I don't know if something got cut off, but I think yes, you're right, Varu, which is that, and I want to take a step back to understand where the clients have come up with this. Fundamentally, if you think of acquisition, which is getting new customers, retention, which is making sure your current customer base doesn't leave you and go to your competitor or exit your category, and an engagement team, which I don't know whether it's looking at new customers or existing customers, but my guess is it is primarily looking at new customers in the context of a digital medium. Uh, they have created teams for all of this, and they do tend to live in silos because I think you have to take it back to the construct of marketing itself. And if you think about marketing, let's say 20, 30 years ago, primarily the biggest activity that the marketing team, that means the chief marketing officer and his team, did is in the area of acquiring new customers, which is advertising. And that's where all this model has come from. So you went to business school, you learned marketing, which told you marketing was about understanding customers, it was understanding your product, it was understanding pricing, it was understanding your distribution, it was understanding your promotion, which is your advertising and media. Now, if you've gone to classical marketing subjects, you'd have understood this as a four P's, and as they expanded, they kept adding P to it, like people became one P, etc. But essentially, marketing was a diverse set of things, which you call the marketing mix that you brought into focus to deliver great business for your brand. But the bulk of the money of marketing spending went to advertising and media. So what happened over time is that the chief marketing officer and marketing people in succession, the skill set and the competence they built was to guide advertising, which means briefing advertising agencies, telling other agencies how to get my message out in what context, and therefore show it to a large set of people, which is the era of mass media. And when digital came along, and digital is a misnomer, when the internet came along, they took these very same constructs and put it into the new model, which means the internet became another space for media. You call it, whether you want to call it display media or search media, essentially thinking of how do I interrupt somebody, give them a message so that they come and buy my product. This is where all the skill sets have been built, right? And there are media agencies and advertising agencies. And when social came along, there is a social media marketing division that gets opened up, and there is a media agency that takes care of that. Communities, on the other hand, is harder to outsource to somebody else, because a community manager in its core construct, or even to call it just a one individual's job, is hard, because the ideal community manager is the business leader who understands his business, his product, and has the ability to change the ecosystem. But usually very young people become community managers, but they are actually trying to do the job. If the mass media ecosystem didn't exist, they are actually going to try and do the job that originally a founder would have done of a startup will do, because he doesn't have the money to spend on mass media advertising. He can't really hire a social media agency. He can't even really pay Facebook. So what does he do? He starts building a community of customers of his product and starts building from there on. Hopefully, if he's not gone to IIM Ahmedabad or Harvard Business School, he'll probably do a very good job. But this is the ecosystem in which you work. And so when we try to show value to our clients, the first thing we have learned over time is not to play by the old rule book. The old rule book says that, you have to show a dashboard, a metrics, a progress chart, which all came through the area of social media, now stuck onto the communities world, where you're on this breathless race to show results. And those guys will declare, which, when I say those guys, I mean the social media agencies, some genius who's running somebody's Instagram feed, will just talk in terms of how many people have been reached. And God only knows whether they've been impacted, but how many people have been reached, and say that's mission accomplished. Taking that model of metrics and sticking it into communities is going to make you do things that is likely to be counterproductive to the very act of forming communities. So I suggest, and at least my experience has been, and our experience has been, the communities that we have managed to do sustainably are the ones where we have conversed more about changing the paradigm. Changing the paradigm is that you have to start thinking of building the idea of communities, and that's not just one person outsourced job. Educating, inducting the existing team into doing community thinking so everybody operates like a brand steward contributing towards building a community is really potentially the job. It's easy to sit here and tell you that that's what needs to be done. If we don't do it that way, we run the risk of becoming suboptimal in our core purpose of building communities. And then the only communities we end up building is the ones we build for ourselves, right? And I think that's been hard learning after 3-4 years of this struggle, because we've all gone down that path and says, we'll create massive engagement in 6 months. Then you'll think of things that are suboptimal to building trust and those kinds of things. But I think that's your answer. They are silos because of the nature of marketing itself, but they are not anti-community. It's the paradigm that they have told themselves and operated under for many years has to be changed, and they need to be shown the light. And then I think the dominoes tend to fall. Okay, that's first question. Now I got a whole lot of new questions. Let me go back to it. And I hope, Varu, that answers at least part of your questions. How do you differentiate community building and growth or marketing? Azhar, that's from Azhar Shams. I'm saying, I think that's a crucial thing. I don't think they're different. I think community building is central to marketing activity. Ideally, marketing's goal, fundamental role of marketing was to find the right customers for your product, stay conversant with them, understand what they really want from your product, solve that, still stay connected with them, understand how they use your product, how their lives can be improved, who these people are there more people like these, can we connect them to each other, so we are building an ecosystem. This is really the role of marketing. The role of marketing was to understand people and deliver a product. It was never to do advertising and mass media and splash and all that. Marketing is a means to create business, and I would say intermediate to that, marketing is a means to form community. Marketing has forgotten what its true role is, which is the reason when you go to many large organizations, I'm not going to name them here, but you can pretty much guess who they are, especially brick and mortar guys and maybe even a lot of digital guys. It is only now they are thinking that maybe the CRM department should actually belong to the chief marketing officer. Customer relationship management should actually rest with marketing. Is that really new insight? But that's the domain in which you live, because customer relationship management is the unsexy part of marketing. So you really didn't want to do it. You kept it at arm's length and says, okay, these are for those geeks and numbers nerds, and periodically they'll show me some charts and I'll look good to my supervisors, and I kept them away. Or at least I feel like, okay, I will keep them at arm's length as long as they don't make me look bad, but they are people I pull out of, like rabbits out of hat once in a while. The CMO usually did not go to attend CRM meets. The CMO went to all ad agency conferences and cons and wherever else it is. You really don't see the chief marketing officer of Walmart at the CRM meet until, let's say, if you span back 5-6 years back. And that's the nature of it. They're not different. Community management is at the heart of marketing. And the fundamental purpose of marketing was to build business and for the relationship with its customers. I think brands are starting to realize it now, because the conventional taps of the marketing domain, which is advertising and media and all that stuff, currently when everything's shut down, looks like a foolish thing to do, right? So that's why you see brands flapping their hands and marketing managers and CMOs trying to justify their very existence, because they thought their job was only about pushing stuff down the advertising pipeline. And the longer this goes, we have a window of opportunity. But I think that opportunity is to bring them to our side versus take an antagonistic fight with them. Because then they'll only get their backs to the wall and then we'll lose the moment we have. So that's at least my theory on where we stand. What can we offer a brand as a community? How to do pricing? how to convince unconvinced brands about community. This is from Malvika. What can we offer as a brand as a community? I think let's answer that, because I think once you answer that, everything else falls in place. Let's say the brand doesn't form community. I'll take as mass market a brand like, let's take any FMCG brand. Let's take Unilever, for example. Giant corporation has a lot of products. Pretty much all their business there is that they've created big giant brands on the power of advertising in the past. They have encapsulated the entire value proposition into their product. They have a distribution system where every kirana store in every sub taluk will have, I don't know, Lifebuoy or Fair and Lovely and whatever, right? And the only way they reach their audiences was through mass media advertising. Now, it's not like that mass media advertising is going to go away. It still plays a role. But increasingly, they realize that for many, many brands, they are at a disadvantage. The disadvantage may be one, the power of advertising itself is diminishing because you got so much stuff thrown at you every day. Most of the country is going digital in one shape or form. So eventually, we will not be watching as much. Right now, television is still powerful. It's still big in the age of digital. But you know that young people are really not watching television the conventional way. They will bypass the channel ecosystem and they'll go to your devices and whatever else. And that's where they are consuming content. So the power of advertising to interrupt you and then tell you why you should buy my brand is already diminishing. They know that. They are looking at the ticking time bomb. It is going down continuously year over year. In another 5-10 years, the millennials are already going to be 25 plus. Then what are you going to do? In one fell swoop, your customer base, your audience base will drop like crazy. They need an alternative to that. Digital is, again, because they've used the paradigm of showing advertising in digital form to an audience, is held. They're held by their by the balls by giants like Facebook and Google. To reach your very own Facebook fans today, a brand has to pay a ton of money to Facebook to reach who's potentially their own customer. And they don't even know who these customers are anymore, because these brands have not invested in their own properties, in their own spaces, etc. So on the one hand, traditional is going to fall in power. On the other hand, you're going to be at the mercy of anybody who controls the audience data. Unless these guys start investing in their tribes, they are going to be up shit creek. I mean, that slowly that realization is going to come. You can read it happening across the board where narratives are being said. And they're at least now open to the idea of community. And I think if we don't tell our narrative right, if the community's ecosystem, whether that is in this forum or globally, doesn't tell the narrative right, the narrative will be told by those whose existence is under threat, which is the ad agencies and the social media companies, who will now start forming community agencies and say, this is the way to, again, go back to advertising your messaging to them, because they don't fundamentally come from the standpoint of actually forming communities. We have to tell clients that you need to invest in your own people doing the hard work of actually building a relationship with your audience. And you have to start now so that in 3-4 years, you'll be ready. And this is not an indulgence activity. This is survival. This is thriving in the next 5-6 years. 5 years later, if you're going to start, you'll already get wiped out in the marketplace by somebody else who built community. That's the reality. And I think that narrative makes business leaders pause and say, okay, if I'm going to be spending $100 in doing the traditional stuff, nothing will go wrong if I take $10 out of there and put it in this. Right? If I put $10 in, which is exactly how digital advertising started over the years. They started putting small amounts, and every year that budget started growing by 50-60% until where it is now. I think communities may be well on that trajectory. There will be some brands will buck the trend and pivot and say, I'm going entirely community, screw Facebook and Google. But for it to get there, this work has to happen right now. And that's at least our learning from talking to clients. And this narrative sticks because they're feeling the pressure of powerlessness, frankly. Okay, and I guess pricing, etc., is a value proposition that comes from there, but that's a difficult debate to put. I think they have to invest in people. They need somebody today in their team who understands the philosophy and is a cheerleader for forming communities, who has an ability to to bring cross-functional teams together to nurture a community. This becomes just one person sitting in a corner and running it. It's very easy to replace it and lose sight of it. But a cross-functional team with reporting to senior leadership, ideally the CEO, if not the CMO, has chances for success. And that's where I put the success rates of doing it, and the pricing is its own math. Fundamentally, it's human resource. So that I would leave you to figure that out. It's too hard to hazard a guess. What else? How would you convince any enterprise to initiate your own community? Kartik answering. I think I might have answered it in conjunction with what Malvika has asked Kartik. So hopefully that answer is clear. If not, do ping it again in the group and I'll try to answer it distinctly. Even though my community is active, I find it difficult to engage members specifically into brand campaign posts. Maybe members think it is in the benefit of admins and not them. How to blend the usual engagement with driving traffic into the campaign posts? I think this is specifically about the act of how to nurture engagement in your community, not really a discussion for a CEO. But I think from our experience, I'll answer it very shortly. Our experience, it is that and this is the way we have rationalized it, that every content piece that a brand sends out, ideally is the start of a conversation. That's the only reason to put it. And I welcome bouquets, brickbats, anything. I just don't want apathy. Right now, brands have a mandate with all their social media agencies or their digital agencies to produce content, which is first designed to be used for paid, which is I'm going to produce this content and I'm going to pay money to expose it to the intended audience so that they will enter my purchase funnel, hopefully very close to the buy stage. They'll buy my stuff. Therefore, I can look good and say, "Itna paisa aaya." I can form an attribution link, and that's how they design these things. And then, oh, by the way, I got 10 lakh fellows who have liked me on Facebook, and I've got another 1 lakh guys on Instagram. Banaya na, dal do wahan. And then what? So every day you look at this many mainstream brands, Instagram feeds and Facebook pages, looks like, oh my God, they are incredibly active. You'll have 10 lakh fellows on Facebook and you'll have maybe 10 comments, which are mostly monosyllabic. And if you really look at it deeply, either they are people abusing them because they are trying to help kind of get customer service because they have not been able to reach a human being, or it is insiders. उनका एक team वाला बैठ के कर रहा है या agency वाला बैठ के इसको like कर रहा है. That's it. It's bankrupt audience that's sitting there, right? And I think that narrative, if we change to say, look, you put this out there in your community, I'm going to use this to spark conversation. Even if it is to comment on the efficacy of that, even if it is to abuse that, I don't want apathy. I'm not interested in views and likes. I am only interested in actually people taking the effort to type something out and tell me something, and I'm going to sustain those conversations. And we have tended to look only as conversations as success. I frankly don't care about how many people viewed it. I only care about how many people conversed in our small communities that we are in, because that's the only index of saying somebody took the trouble to engage with you that they otherwise wouldn't have. And that should be the metric of doing it. If you do it that way, maybe some of the narratives will change, which is that customers are now interested. Maybe they are commenting on it, they are using that to spark a conversation. The idea was not to say, hey, you like this ad or this brand message, unless you're telling me, hey, buy this product, which is a little harder to put right here. But the content piece can usually be used to spur conversations, and that's the philosophy that we have used. Okay, that's the last question I want to take on, how to actually engage in a community. But let's talk about what arguments you had from brands. Enterprise thinks marketing and community building is the same as Vikram. No, they actually don't, Vikram. Right now, they don't even think. They are curious about community building is what I'll say. We have come to that stage because the traditional marketing levers are not working. And forward-thinking business leaders, I don't even know if it's CMO, or definitely CEO is thinking that the customer acquisition funnel is increasingly going to be suboptimal. The CEO doesn't really engage with the the marketing question on a day-to-day basis because he's thinking about the business and business success. And this is the distinction. When you build a community, it is not just for marketing. Though the budgets for starting a community tends to come from marketing because marketing inside a business ecosystem is the front line where they tend to interact with customers, right? The other component is customer retention and service, which actually used to sit within marketing, but marketing found it unsexy, so separated it and gave that power to somebody else to run, right? Equally, digital transformation in a large context should have sat with marketing because marketing should have sat at the intersection of R&D, CRM, etc. But I'm not talking about that right now. But if the current ecosystem of a business's success is dependent on how well marketing does its job, marketing is currently becoming weaker and weaker over time, and the power is being taken away by other guys whom you'll have to pay so that you don't get wiped out. So a CEO is going to be looking at it and says marketing is not doing its job. So your closest candidate whom you can convince fast is marketing for two reasons. One, they are feeling the pressure. Two, they control the budget to invest in this. If you go to a CEO and tell them also, unless the CEO is all powerful, he's usually going to say, I love the idea, talk to the CMO, right? So it depends on where your entry is. But the marketing guy has a vested interest in making this succeed. And that's where we have tried to intervene right now. And with varied degrees of success. I won't say it's 100% success. It depends on the nature of the company and how business-oriented marketing itself is. Some of the enterprises think social media management, marketing, and community must be done by community managers. Nice idea. Nice question, Kartik. Thank you for asking that. And I think the traditional narrative of community managers has been, well, that's not true. Social media management should be done by somebody else, and the community managers don't really need to be doing this. Community managers are going to do something else, and I think the answer is more interlinked than just saying community is something else while social media does something else. I think those who are invested in, I'm only talking from the client side. I'm not talking about the social media agencies, etc. Right? Even on the client's marketing team, you have a CMO, you have somebody who interacts with the traditional advertising agency, somebody who's handling the, I guess, the social media agency, somebody who's handling analytics, somebody who's handling CRM, hopefully if it's a big enough team, and somebody now who's going to be handling community. The idea of community thinking, that ultimately customer to ek hai, right? He's not going schizophrenic when he's interacting with all these different entities, right? He's only the same customer. You have to be thinking along the philosophy of building communities, and you're going to need friends across all these divisions. The distinct philosophical narrative that has to be told while you're doing activities on a daily basis and a frequent basis is that we have to think in terms of forming a community. We are thinking in terms of forming lasting relationships with our existing customers and newer customers. And you can't do this by separating community management as a separate role altogether. And you can't do it because naturally these fiefdoms will then start looking at you as a threat. And they are not a threat, really. They only want to do right by the brand. They are not protectors of their agencies, etc. You'll have to bring this team together. And the power to bring that team together stands with the leadership. So when you bring them together, there will be guys who will want to come together and try what may be called as skunk works, etc. in a certain team. But community thinking needs to percolate so that social media guys don't think of content banaya, dal diya, mera mandate khatam, finish. Reach ho gaya, khatam. Or to get more reach without having to pay Facebook, let me go and pay some influencers. So again, more reach has happened. It is all trying to take the power of actually building communities away, and they are all potential monies and activities that could have been used to forge communities. I don't think it is as, if we take a stance saying, no, they are not the same, that will help. Equally, if we take a stance that says, no, community management is now going to replace advertising, that's also incorrect. But advertising, if it was created with the intent to be used to form community. They think in terms of, let's say, the traditional marketing system. things in terms of campaigns. They make an annual calendar that says, these are my peaks, this is my IPL, this is my Diwali, and I have to put campaigns. And the same thinking has come. CRM thinks in terms of campaigns, dalo ye time pe, I will do SMS blast and people will come and buy certain things. They all think in terms of campaign thinking. Community management is the one activity that doesn't think campaign. It's only thinking in terms of building relationships and fostering that relationships and deepening that relationship over time. But all these guys are creating content and activity that can be repurposed to say all of us are now going to be using our tools in our hand and interacting with each other consistently, and we are going to measure how well we have forged relationships with our brand. I don't have a dashboard for that yet, but right now we are at that philosophy stage by saying, let us sit together, work together, and figure this out. Because if these guys are fighting with each other, you will be suboptimal. A brand new enterprise that starts will not have all these constructs in place. They'll sit together and say, let's figure it out. And I think that's the narrative. I remember I was at a brand called Paperboard many years back. They were not as big as they are right now. And it was, I think, Diwali or Dashara or something like that. I don't really remember. It was one of these festivals. And the entire company, I'm saying CMO, CEO, jo bhi roles hoga, head of marketing, they're all sitting there and they have a ton of steel dabbas. The old dabbas, not mithai dabba, like a lunch box. They were sitting there and there was a couple of guys sitting on the floor with a whole host of steel dabbas, and he was busy engraving something on each of these steel dabbas. We asked them, it was a context of digital marketing, what's going on? He says, look, we are trying to now enter, of course, we entered the retail chain, we want to enter enterprise and we want to get our foot in the door. And we don't really have, we can't be using advertising and stuff like that. वो सब तो नहीं चलेगा. And we think that a lot of the admin guys in many of these large corporations who make these decisions, they're all a little bit more traditional. And we are a brand that is bringing traditional flavors to modern living. And we all have nostalgia of when we were young and we used to get the steel dabbas of mithais going out. So we had people here in our office make these laddus. So they're handmade by us. We know all the names of these people. So we are engraving this gift dabba and we will individually carry it. Those who have the relationships go there and hand these dabbas over. So I know that will be the start of a conversation for why Paperboard needs to get in. Now I was thinking, what a beautiful idea. You could have thought of it as a campaign activity, but really the idea was that I really can't, even if they had money for advertising or traditional digital, whatever jazz you have, you email blast to tell why they should choose Paperboard. They didn't think like that. They didn't say that, okay, digital fellow, find a right targeted list of these admin fellows, उनको एक discount offer दे देंगे और Paperboard अंदर चला जाएगा. They all sat together and thought, how do we build a relationship with these guys? And they went and did an activity. Now, you classify it as a marketing activity? Do you classify it as a community activity? Do you call it as a reach activity? I don't know the narrative. But those guys weren't broken by the siloed thinking के बस मेरे पास एक activity है, agency को जाके पूछते हैं क्या idea आएगा, and then उसी को चलाते हैं. So they didn't think that way. So interesting things came out. And that's the natural way businesses build relationships with customers. It's got broken once a company becomes so large. You think that no, ये structure सब चाहिए. And community management in that sense is an insurgent campaign to return the glory of marketing power back to itself. And that's the way I see it, which is a resonant narrative with anybody who heads marketing in any large organization, because they are powerless. The CMO is judged by how well the CEO, or maybe, and I'm not being sexist, but I'm saying how well the CEO spouse liked the last campaign. So dande padenge if the campaign is not received well. I have been to a lot of large business organizations that says, we had a great response to our campaign. I said, really? How do you know? हमारे dealers को बहुत पसंद आया. Dealers खरीदने वाला था ये तेरा product. But that's the way they think. That's where the feedback comes. That's how you pat yourself on the back and saying you have done a good job. Which is why the advertising ecosystem has award shows. Which is why the social media ecosystem has award shows. Now CRM awards are being given out. Apparently Indians want to give awards even to CEOs, but that's a conversation for a separate day. Long answer to a short question, but I think it's an important one. we are operating in the domain of marketing. We are not outside of that. But that's because, and we hesitate to say that because the true great purpose of marketing in its glory days has been surrendered to nonsensical activity, and community management is a pathway to regain what its true purpose was. Its true purpose was never to chipka nonsense to somebody who doesn't want to buy. It was to understand people, understand what they wanted, give your solution to them, continue to engage with them to solve a problem for them, keep them engaged so that you and they are one. That is the idea. And I don't know if there is any other better narrative for what a community is trying to do. In this context, telling somebody about a brand's activity or a brand's offer or whatever else is not a disservice, because the audience that, not even an audience, the community that you have built likes it, wants it, is engaged with that conversation. And frankly, only those people matter. The rest of the people have self-selected to be outside, which is the way it should be. I remember when we were students of advertising in business school, I think there's a famous book. I don't know if it's Truth Lies in Advertising, but if it is, then it sounds about right. But it was a quote from a CMO at that point in time, I think 30, 40 years back, who said, "I know half my advertising money is wasted. The problem is I don't know which half," right? And community management is a method where you can realistically see, visually see, not in a dashboard, you can visually see the power of having built a community. Whether it is people queuing up for your product the previous day, right? And whether it is, people showing up because your brand is in crisis and showing up just to contribute. There are various ways in which communities behave that is very evident and doesn't only have to be captured in a dashboard. It's not that dashboards are bad. Dashboards give you a sense of control and power, but communities are about narratives that help leadership take decisions. And once you cross that, once they've taken one or two decisions based on input for the community, you're in. They know the value of it, and then the more you build communities, they get the answers to it. It is not as simple as saying, "Oh, my engagement was at 30%, now I've gone to 35%. Nobody understands what that is. But if somebody takes a decision based on, I heard this from the community and I made this and that's a success, you're in. I think our goal as community managers is to close that loop, get that to decision making. Even if it's a micro change, it has lasting impact on decision makers. Okay, let's see. Now we are at 7:44. Himanshu, do you want me to prioritize anything, or you can also flag something, okay, if it's coming over here, because I don't want to miss out on an important question. Where do we go? How would you measure success of a community? I think Kartik, in a nutshell, is what I alluded to. People remember the story. It's not that numbers, reach, and dashboard shouldn't be done. You need to do that. That's hygiene. So you yourself have some idea of saying where it is progressing. But what you tell to senior leadership is, we use terms like insights, etc., but fundamentally it's stories. Now, I'll give you an example of this. This was a community we ran, one of the first communities we started. It was for a retailer. When I say that's like an apparel retailer, like your Max and Pantaloons, that kind of a retailer. And one of the first things we had done for this brand was an inquiry to ask people, and we put a human question towards them. And it was very nascent at that point in time. And we said that, look, there is somebody inside this organization whose job it is to train our staff. And she has X amount of money, and that's all the budget there is. And she wants to invest it somewhere. And this is what she's thinking. She's thinking that our staff needs to be a bit more polished. Their uniforms need to change. They need to be taught a little bit more English. And this is what is going to get us where it is. And this is what they were thinking. But before we expose that to people, we asked them, look, if there is only one thing we can do, what would you like us to change? Right? And knowing that we may or may not be able to do it, but let's say you prioritize for us. And the people came back and said, look, I like your brand and all that. I can put up with everything. What really pisses me off is You have great sales, and when your sales happen, your store is chock a block. And at that point in time, your checkout counter breaks down. And I have gone through all the trouble of finding, what I want. I found the sizes. Your store may not be as neat as it is right then, because I understand it's mayhem during this time, and everybody wants the deals, and your staff is stretched to the limit. But after I have literally almost like climbed Mount Everest, and finally when I'm about to receive my prizes at the checkout counter, if you delay at that point in time because things don't work, or they are too slow, or they tell me this is not this discount, and that happens, I am really exhausted. And I sometimes just give up and I just leave. And you may not even be capturing it, but this is what I'd like to change. Now, the first solution, obviously, the team looked at it and says, okay, let's retrain our people. And they did, and I'm sure it worked to whatever extent it worked, and maybe it was some time and motion study, etc. That is the first thing they did. But here's the thing. They realized that this was a problem, and a year and a half later, because this thing was percolating in that CMO's head for so long, 1.5 years later, they changed their entire point of sale system to ensure that time got dramatically cut down. And then he came back and told us that first thing, I got so much value out of that community just by that. That's how the percolation sits. It's not just, you've done better engagement over time. That's hygiene for them. They've already taken you on board. And hopefully you've done a good job of telling the client or the brand that community is a marriage. You're not on Tinder. You don't start a community and say, "Ye nahi chal raha yaar, teen mahine baad hatao." If that's the ingoing hypothesis, don't even start community. Tumse hoga hi nahi. You come when you're ready to get married. Once you've gotten college out of your ecosystem, then you come and start communities. But if you're in marriage, that incremental dashboard is not why you stay. You're staying for the big moments where, in life, where just like you and your spouse or you and your girlfriend will remember your relationships by those big markers, where you did the exceptional thing where it sat there. That's what a CMO is looking for. And you have to be constantly on the quest for that. Ultimately, see, a community manager's job, when you tell them, is building relationships. That is really the job. Brands don't build relationships. Brands have consistently in the last 100 years built interruptions, and they are getting better at doing interruptions, while the ecosystem of consumers is getting more and more tools to destroy these interruptions. And now to build these interruptions, you have Facebook and Google say, interruption chahiye kya? Paisa do. Right? So you're not even going to be good at building interruptions. Communities are about forging relationships. Community managers and people interested in community thinking, their job is to understand customers, equally understand what the brand stands for. So you're presenting the brand not in some, in some false light to customers. You really understand the brand. You believe the purpose of the brand. You believe the products of the brand. You know why the product has been created in this way. You equally have to forge a relationship with internal people. And I think that's a huge, huge opportunity. And I didn't really think of this earlier, though it's been there in our minds, that marketing guys don't go and visit R&D guys. Okay, marketing guys don't go to the factory. They don't go at those are not the sexy places, because the factories might be in some boondock somewhere. Make the effort, forge relationships with the people who are actually creating the product, meet the internal sales ecosystem, etc. Your opportunity while you're trying to build a relationship is to understand the business better. So when you're communicating to customers, you know why the product is the way it is. What is the thinking that has gone behind making this packaging look the way it is? Why this color was chosen, etc. Nobody has any curiosity about these things anymore. They are too busy keeping their ad agency ecosystem at bay, busy. But here is the magical thing. If you know it and you have the right set of customers, your customers are intrigued by it. Your community members like talking about this. You like talking about this. You have so many tools to create context and connections with your membership, because you're interested in the brand and you're interested in the people. And the current marketing managers and CMOs, etc., have basically taken their eye off the ball for doing all those things. And they will never spend advertising money into telling you why the packaging shape is like this. उसके लिए पैसा नहीं मिलता है. पैसा किसके लिए मिलता है? विराट कोहली मिलेगा क्या? Can we put him in our ad? उसको 10 crore पकड़ा देंगे तो चलेगा क्या? This is where the thinking goes. You have an opportunity to show real power of customers coming towards brands, and the person who's most interested in that is a business leader, and by extension, the leader of marketing. And I think our job should be to do that and to consistently show this power to the person who's doing social media inside your organization, the person who's doing this advertising inside your organization. So what they are doing is in sync with what you're also doing. They're all people on your own team. You won't win by making enemies out of them. You win when they become you. And I think that should be our goal, I guess. If I had to put it as, I don't know, not a bumper sticker, but yeah, that should be our goal as community managers, is a thought. Okay. What else? As resources are limited and finance is the key. Okay, Himanshu is asking for Sweta. Okay, in this crisis situation, it has badly affected the functioning of communities. It's a major growth blocker. I get that, and I really get that, Sweta, and which is the unfortunate part. But I think the narrative to take back when they are doing this is to us. Say it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to build community because the other things are not going to work. It really doesn't. Consumers are not sitting waiting to consume your bogus advertising anymore in the age of Corona, right? If resources are limited and finances in question, community should be one space that brands should not be willing to give up. I'm not saying that because most businesses they don't take a scalpel approach to budget cuts. Budget cuts are not done strategically; they are done democratically. Which means, what do you say? You tell, हर department में इतना cuts होगा. You don't really look at it by saying कि बस ये department अभी important है कि नहीं है, वो important है नहीं है. So they don't think like that. They think that it's almost like a communist way of looking at it. Let everybody have universal pain, and they'll be okay. And in that context, sometimes communities may lose out, but I would have faith saying that the leadership is more amenable to receiving community-related conversation if our ingoing premise is not to say, I am more important than that other guy you might sack. Because that's the narrative everybody will come in. It's like, I don't know if you've seen this television show called House MD, where different people are trying to convince the senior doctor to keep them on the team. And people are coming in and continuously trying to show them why they are important. Our ingoing premise is communities are important. And I think, and to tell them why that should sustain. Community building is compounding interest. Okay, if you are building communities, it pays off. We know it pays off in the long term. But that is a half-baked narrative, which is that it pays off in the long term, so I can start it later. That's how people think. अरे उसके लिए time लगेगा. अभी lottery ticket जो मिल रहा है उसमें पैसे डाल दो. But what it pays off in the long term is 100, 200 times larger than what you can ever get by buying lottery tickets. That narrative you don't really tell very powerfully is my sense of how when I read all the books by whoever has written them, and we're not taking names, I know we all know who's written it. We all tell it takes time. When you say it takes time, that is half true. But more importantly, invest here and you're future-proofing your business, because the rest is money down the drain. It's compound interest. I mean, you all know this. If you've seen that one grain of rice in that chessboard narrative that people have heard, right? Put one grain in the first square, put 2 grains in the next, and put 4 in the next, and so on and so forth. By the time you reach 64, you have taken up all the rice that's there in the world. And that's the idea of building communities. And I think that should be our goal. We are in an inspirational space while we are trying to build careers for it. The world will come over to our side, I have no doubt about that. But this is our time to inspire everybody and carry them around, I think. That's the opportunity. Rather than getting caught only in the, I build better communities than the other guy, or they are not building it right, I'll build it right, etc. That's not the narrative. I leave this, I generally try to tell stories more than anything else, but I'll give you this thought as the final one, and I apologize if we haven't taken all questions, and I wanted to be mindful of time, and I told Himanshu that also. And if you have any more questions, by all means, please post it in the group, and I will try and address them as much as possible later on. But the idea of building communities really came from when I worked in my earlier stint. I worked in advertising for 12 years, so I know the dark side on the other side. I used to run strategic planning in advertising in agencies in India and in the US for about 10, 12 years in my career. 14 years, good Lord. Yeah. And one of the agencies that I worked with in the US worked in a very niche space. It worked in an area of ad agencies who were focused on a niche audience, which is like Asian American audiences only. So while our clients would have been Walmart and MetLife and McDonald's and all those Warner Brothers kind of clients, they'll have mainstream agencies, and just like you have a social media agencies for this targeted audience, because there were like 700 media outlets that focus specifically on Chinese and Koreans and Indians and Vietnamese and Japanese and immigrants to the US, and these guys all had money. You wanted to target them. There are specific categories that would reach out to these brands. Now, there were about 30 agencies in total in this ecosystem, and we were the giant. We were part of Interpublic, and we had all the bells and whistles, etc. And our success rate in winning business would have been really 95% if we walked into many of these agencies. But Bill, who was the CEO of the company and the founder of the company, always said that we can't suck up all the business in the world, right? All these other agencies need to thrive, that he would never poach another competitor's business. He would never belittle somebody else in his narrative. That should not be us. It is some of the beautiful things I see in the spirit of community, folks. You're all helping each other, though I don't know whether you compete with each other or not. Maybe if you work in the brand ecosystem, you do. And I'm sure community folks will become bigger and grow, etc. But Bill was always about getting everybody a leg up by saying his purpose was that our audience, which is Asian Americans, are largely an ignored audience by brands. So products and services, whether that is public services, private services, etc., come to us last. We are on a mission to change the destiny of these audiences, and we are doing it by means of building an advertising and public relations business. But our mission has always been that. So anybody who's on that mission, while they may be competing in my business, in my mission, they are a fellow compatriot. Similarly, I think when we are trying to make community thinking part and parcel of the thinking of marketing, people and senior leadership over time, every one of them is a friend. Even though right now it might look like they are opposing us, every one of them is a friend. And when we think that way, they may or may not convert at the first conversation. Doesn't matter. Have more conversations. They'll eventually come to us, and the dominoes will fall. All right, that's 7:59. Himanshu, I don't know. You'll have to give some review ratings, man. This is the first one, and I really hate just talking myself. I wish there was a way we could all have interacted besides writing text to each other. What do you want to do? Do you want to continue? I can take another maybe 15 minutes, but I really need to close after that. But your call. Maybe you want to poll the audience, and I don't want to put you on the spot also. There is a sanctity to sticking to the time, as well as there is a joy to staying around a little bit more for the after party. So your call. Meanwhile, I'm just going to scroll through here for any questions. What else? How to set up consulting practice to convince enterprises to invest in community building? Very interesting question, Vineet. We tried doing that actually. And of course, we took a very niche kind of community building because we are fundamentally a strategy consulting firm. So we have taken the idea of community building to only use communities of your very top end customers for insight work, because we don't, neither do we have the capabilities nor the size and strength to run large communities for brands, which I still believe, in my heart of hearts, believe that has to be done internally. It has to be done internally inside the brands. You really shouldn't be outsourcing this to an ad agency or a social media agency, because it is not the manufactured sizzle of the ads, of the visual titillation that many of these agencies are adept at creating that is important. It is actually the sincerity and the honesty and the truthfulness of what you are going to communicate. It is in our conversation the strength is. And consulting practice to convince enterprises to invest in community building. I guess many people are doing that, Vineet. I think people who write books do it. I'm sure Richard is doing it. I'm sure CMX does it. I'm sure Paras and you guys sitting in this community ecosystem do it. Is there a business in convincing enterprises to invest in community building? I think there can be a consulting practice, but it will have to be a coaching business is my sense, which is that you will have to say that you will play the role of a convincing the senior leadership that this is a good thing to start and create, and you need to pay me for or doing that, and then you will have to put a cross-functional team whom I can either oversee or for whom in their KPIs running and managing this community is going to be important, right? And then allow me to marshal this force to do that, and you need to stay invested for at least, let's say, I don't know what threshold you want to, at least a year and a half. When I say invested, is not just to pay me as a consultant, but invested in terms of giving time and contributing to, which is important, contributing to the success of this community. Not sit on a pedestal and judge whether this team is doing the right thing or not, because we will create this business asset together, right? The moment we say, okay, I have a reporting structure and they are going to sit on the other side and judge you, you're going to try and do things that's going to please them versus taking care of your community, right? And I think that may be probably the philosophical construct to do it. We never had the capabilities to do that, so we never went down that path to do it. So we have stayed with communities where the insight mining is much more important, and we've restricted the size, so it's still possible to outsource it to somebody like us. But this field will evolve. I think eventually technology may solve some part of this problem, but philosophically, we will have to keep educating the leadership about it. If it just becomes a technology solution, the risk is you create another special caste of community agencies or community management firms who will handle this thing. And while it looks unsexy, the power structure still sits with advertising, media, and all those things. And for example, if you think about digital transformation as an idea, where digital was supposed to percolate the entire space of business, I have been hearing it for, I would say, at least 15 years, and it is still new. It is still, people are saying, okay, we are on that part of that journey where now first we'll have to form, first we'll fix the back end, and then we'll come to the front end, and then we'll have one view of the customer. It is still difficult to do. And I think it may be because we never got on the CEO's agenda. I think that should be the goal. Like when we create community forum structures, meetings, conferences, as this group will grow, and I'm sure the community ecosystem here grows, you have to bring those guys and educate. Once you start from there, everything else will happen. Going from the bottom up is incredibly hard. It takes a long time. You'll have to wait for some of you to become CEOs, and that you don't want to do. All right. Can competing communities join together for campaigns and grow together? Why not? I think that should be entirely possible. I think, why not? I think brands are increasingly getting together to solve, as long as you can find common ground. I can think of many areas where I think the problems facing customers and people can't be solved by a single brand. Especially, I think in marketing construct, it says like you can come together to fight against a common enemy on behalf of the people, whatever that common enemy is, right? In times of crisis, you'll find that. A Walmart will compete with a Target and whoever else elsewhere, but during Hurricane Katrina, they don't think about their business, their things, etc. While that is there at some point, right now your neighbor's house is burning. You don't, at that point in time, look at pros and cons. If you have a hose, you go ahead and try to put the fire out. I think that's entirely possible to do if there's a common enemy. Otherwise, yeah, I would think, can you really overcome competitive thinking? Difficult. I mean, that's a gut call. I'm sure you have evidences to the contrary. Is it safe to link groups with third-party analytics? Can't. That's beyond my purview of this conversation. Probably something that somebody else has to answer. I think, yeah, I think, guys, in all, I think by and large we might have answered most of the questions. I think we are at least 5 minutes over time, which is a record for us. We tend to run much longer. But thank you for the questions. That was a very interesting first time experience. Thank you, Himanshu, for suggesting it. Rather than a standard stage presentation kind of thing, I've enjoyed it. It would have been so much better to have done it in person, but this was very, very exciting for me personally. Hopefully, you guys all got value out of it. And yeah, have a good night, a great weekend. We are going back into lockdown tomorrow, so if anybody wants to do a beer run, this is about the time to do it, I guess. Yeah. All right, guys, take care.